today we are going to be talking about the topic of human resources, and we'll be looking at some essay questions, and we'll be looking at some Section B type questions, and we'll be going through the formatting of both those Section B questions as well as the essay questions, and just giving you a bit of tips here and there about how you can get the best possible results. So with you, you should have the telematics workbook, and this is the book that we are going to be working through today. So if you have this with you, please make sure that you are following with us and fill in the blanks in the necessary spaces. Okay, so to kick off our show, as I said, we are going to be speaking about the topic of human resources, and the first thing that we're going to speak about is the role of the Human Resource Department. And Mr. Van Zyl, you will be explaining to us the role of the Human Resource Department.
Thank you very much, Mr. de Klerk. I think it's always good to start with the concept before we actually go into a long essay question or whatever the case may be. In this case, it's the Human Resource Department, and I think it is very important for us to know that human resources is about the management of human capital. Now, you won't find that in a textbook or anything like that. This is just for us to understand what the function is about. Now, human capital means all the skills and the knowledge and experience that we as an organization possess. It's not necessarily the amount of people that there are, but it's the combination of all of their skills and knowledge and experience. And it is the HR function's duty to recruit and select such knowledge and skills and experience. We need to add to that by training people, and we need to develop and retain that human capital as far as possible. Okay, Mr. de Klerk. Right, so now that we understand what the HR function is all about, I think it is important for us to also, just before we go into the Section C question, to have a couple of tips on how to write a business studies essay. A couple of things that you need to remember. A business studies essay is not an English or a history essay. We do not develop arguments or whatever. Basically what it is an extended question. It's just a long type of question. But it does have a specific format. And the format starts with an introduction. And that word introduction has to be present when we write a business studies essay. It will then contain a body, and as I will show to you later, the headings in the question will be those bullet points that would be the question itself, and I will show you later how that works. And then later on we conclude with the conclusion, and once again that word conclusion has to be there. Right, now I'm going to start with an introduction. An introduction contains maximum 2 facts. Okay, it's 1 mark each for 2 facts. You need to write in bullet point form. Now, boys and girls, it is very important in business studies that we actually do write in bullet point form. It will help you to structure your answer correctly so that I don't write too much. I know exactly how many marks I should get for that question if I write in such a format. As I say, this is not history, it is not English. This is a business studies essay. The next one is, we may not repeat information from the leading statement in your introduction. So with other words, they normally give us a little case study. We cannot use that information in the question itself, in the introduction, because we are going to mark it as a repeat. Okay, you mustn't waste any time figuring out an introduction as well, because in the greater scheme of things, an essay question consists of 44 available marks, of which you only need to get 32. So don't waste time figuring out an introduction. It only counts 2 marks. Rather leave it blank and come back to it in a later stage. The body, every bullet point in the question you would normally see, we will do one now. An essay question has normally 4 bullet points, and each one of those bullet points you can write as a heading for your body. Then we know exactly that you've attempted every part of the question. It becomes later very important in your technical marking in FLASO that we need to know that you have attempted every single part of the question. And those are easy marks that sometimes gets thrown away because we leave out certain things that should have been there. Okay. Do not answer any bullet point in the question in your introduction or your conclusion. Okay, the reason is we don't want any repeats. Remember, an introduction counts a maximum of 2 marks. If that was a question in the body that may have counted 8 marks, you then would end up actually having only 4 marks or only 2 marks out of a possible 8. So that is not a good idea to write anything in the bullets into your introduction. Okay, make sure that you have all the headings and that you have written something under each heading. Okay, doesn't matter if you are wrong, but you need to attempt to write something under each heading. This becomes important for your A marks, which I will explain to you a bit later. Right, it brings us to our conclusion. The conclusion requires 1 fact for 2 marks. Once again, don't waste too much time trying to figure it out. It could be any fact that you haven't repeated anywhere in the body. Okay, please do not repeat facts because then you will lose out on that double mark. Okay, I've often seen people make the mistake by including the last bullet point of your question as part of your conclusion. Now, of course, a conclusion counts 4 marks. That last bullet can count actually 8 marks, and you lose out on possible 6 marks. Okay, and then, of course, the word conclusion has to be there. Okay. Mr. De
Okay,
Klerk.
grade 12s. Welcome to Matthew Goniwe at Craddock. Thank you for sending in your message. Just please remember to add your name as well as your school's name so that we can acknowledge you as well as your school. We have quite a few learners tuning in, and welcome to the broadcast today. So the next part of the essay questions is learners are always unsure as to how to address answering the question. So what we have for you is a breakdown of the mark allocation guidelines, and your teacher will always talk about action verbs. And when they speak of these action verbs, this should be an indication to you as to how you should structure your answer. So if you look at the first set of action words that you have been given, these action verbs are only worth 1 mark. So whenever you see a question where you have the words give, identify, list, mention, name, and state, you are only going to get 1 mark for this fact. Okay, so you don't need to write long, drawn-out statements. You simply read the question. If the question says give 2 facts, you only give 2 facts. Don't give more than 2 facts. So if they specify the number of facts that you need to give, identify, list, mention, name, or state, you only specify that specific number. If they say 5, you mention 5. If they say 4, you mention 4. Don't mention more than that. So if you know quite a few, pick the ones that you are certain are correct. Then the next mark allocation guideline is where these action verbs are used, and you can have a look at the list. When these action verbs are used and you give your answer, 2 marks are awarded at the end of the statement. And this is where it gets a bit tricky for quite a few of the learners. They're not always sure as to whether they need to qualify their statement to get a 2nd mark, or whether the one statement that you are making is worth 2 marks or not. So these mark allocation guidelines are in your study guidelines. They are in your core notes that have been given to you. Please make sure that this forms part of your study process so that you're actually learning these verbs, and when you see them, you know how to answer the questions. So when you see these words, make sure that you understand that for these action verbs, the 2 marks will be added at the end of the statement. Then this is always the tricky one, the split marks. So when you see these action verbs, describe, explain, distinguish, discuss, analyze, elaborate, show impact, etc., you need to make a statement and then qualify the statement. So you will get 1 mark for making the statement and a 2nd mark at the end of your sentence for qualifying what you have said. And we'll go through this in a bit more detail when we answer and address the questions in the essay, because then you'll see how the marks are allocated, and it should be a bit clearer for you. Okay, then as part of your resource packs, your teachers would have received, or the schools would have received a flash disk with a lot of resources on there. And as part of the resource pack, you would receive this QR revision booklet. And you simply follow the instructions in terms of downloading the QR reader, use your phone, and it will take you to a link for any of the topics that is covered within business studies. And it's short video clips, and you are able to pick exactly which topic you are wanting to address. Okay, so moving on, we're going to look at the first essay question. And the first essay question reads that the management of Overberg Traders recently appointed Sean as their marketing manager. The business is supposed to orientate and place Sean accordingly. Sean expects Overberg Traders to develop the managerial skills. So this is the leading statement or the scenario that they are giving you. And then this is usually followed by what you are actually required to do. And remember, as Mr. Van Zyl said, do not use any of this statement or do not use any part of the leading statement as part of your introduction, because you will not receive marks for that, because you're repeating what has been given to you already. So your introduction cannot include what has been included in the leading statement. So when you look at the essay questions itself, so this normally follows the leading statement, you will have a number of bullet points, and each bullet point is the question that you need to address. And Mr. Van Zyl, you will be taking us through this first essay.
Yes. Mr. de Klerk, thank you very much again. In terms of the essay, you will see that in this particular one, there are 5 main bullets that you need to answer. Please make sure that you answer every single one of them. Normally, there's only about 4 of those bullet points. So in this case, there's 5. We will be addressing these 5. And I'm going to explain to you how that works. Just a reminder, the first bullet point, explain the meaning of induction, is not your introduction. And recommend 4 aspects that must be included in Sean's employment contract is not your conclusion. That is all part of the body of the question. I've also said you must remember that all of these bullet points you can use as a heading or a subheading that we will see now in bullet 3. Right, so we are going to start with an introduction. Just to put you guys at ease a bit, this question was from the 2016 November examination paper. So you do not really have to copy this. If you have access to the 2016 November paper, you will find all of these things there. Now, as I said, we are going to have, as an introduction, 2 statements of 1 mark each. It's 2 facts, and it can be on either one of the topics that you need to address. So I'm going to use this as the introduction. It says, placement is the process of assigning employees to a vacant position. Of course, vacant means the position that was left empty because somebody resigned or somebody retired, or whatever the case may be, a vacant position where they will function optimally. Employers and employers should adhere to the terms and conditions of the employment contract. Now, all of these things were bullets that you found in the question, and you can use that as an introduction. Okay. The next question was explain the meaning of induction. Now, one of the questions that you might get is how many facts do I need to write, because there's no indication of how many marks are allocated. Now, I normally tell my learners that if there's 4 bullet points, what I want to do is have 8 marks for each bullet point. So with other words, 4 bullets under each question. That should be enough to get you to 32 marks. There's normally 44 or so marks available in an essay question, of which you only need to get 32. Okay, so let's go through them quickly. New employees should be familiarized. Now you can see this came from the memo directly, so you can see that they've split the sentence there, and there's 1 mark allocated. With their new physical work environment, or that / means organizational culture or products and services. So how does it work? The new employee should be familiarized. Now you can ask for the qualifier, familiarized with what? With the culture, the products and the services, or the work environment, and so forth. Okay, next one, employees should be informed. Okay, what do they need to be informed about? They need to be informed about the processes or the procedures of the business. That's your qualifier. Okay, the next one, ensure that employees are well conversant. Conversant with what, you can ask? with the business, safety regulations and rules. There's your qualifier. So you can see how the split marking works, and I think this is the place where many learners that actually do know the work, but because they do not construct the answers quite well in a statement and a qualifier, oftentimes loses out quite a few marks. Okay. The next question said, and you can see there I've written there the word sub, because there were actually two questions in that one bullet. It says the first one is a subheading, discuss the purpose of induction, and the other one says, and state 5 aspects that should be included in an induction program. But both of this actually makes one bullet that you need to answer. So I'm using this one as a subheading, discuss the purpose of induction. Okay. The first purpose is introduce the new employees to the management or colleagues. Why do we need to introduce them? To establish relationships with fellow colleagues at different levels. Okay, different levels means different levels of management, people that are hired to you, people in authority, or people that will be working under you. Right, the next one is explain safety regulations and rules. Why do we need to do that? So that new employees will understand their roles and responsibilities in this regard. Okay, communicate information about the products and service of Overberg Traders and allow new employees the opportunity to ask questions. Why? That will put them at ease and reduce risk and anxiety and fear. Okay, give new employees a tour or information about the layout of the office buildings. Just to get back quickly to induction. Induction is a very, very important role that human resource managers needs to play, and that is to put that employee at ease as quickly as possible. New employees tend to ask a lot of questions. They don't know what's going on, and if that goes on for too long a time, there will be so much time lost being unproductive. So the whole purpose of induction is to get an employee as productive as he can be as soon as possible.
Okay, Dion, we've got quite a few learners tuning in. Good afternoon to Kolalwa and Siamtanda from Raymond Mashlaba, and Kensington High School also says hi to us. So good afternoon to all of you. Learners, I just want to add that in these slides, you will see there right at the bottom of the slide, below the line says page 56 in the core notes. So because we are working in a limited time, we can't always go back to slides or spend a lot of time on slides. So when we are going through this, make a note for yourself which page number in your core notes that you would have been given this information comes from, so that you can rather focus on listening to what we are saying and the tips we are giving you, and then you can always go back to your core notes and come and fill this information in again. So on each slide, right at the bottom, there will be a page number indicating to you where in the core notes this information is coming from. Okay.
Right. I'm going to continue now with this essay question. The next question, remember I told you this is now part of a subheading of the one bullet point that is in our question, and that one said state 5 aspects that should be included in the induction program. Now I just want to mention the word state means I do not have to go into detail in terms of my explanation to get the marks. State is a lower order question where you just have to say a concept. You don't have to go into detail in explaining it. There's no split marks there, none of those things. So let's quickly have a look. It says safety regulations and rules. Once again, you guys can see there, this is just things that need to be there. They don't ask you to explain it. It is just things that will be included without explanation. Safety regulations and rules, overview of the business, information about the business's products and services, meeting with the senior management who will explain the company's vision, mission, job descriptions and daily tasks, the tour of the premises, all of these things. There are many, many more if you go and watch or go and see this paper 2016 November, and you will see many more that is possible answers. I think the mark allocation for this one in the marking guidelines was 8 marks. So once again, I think I'm right on the money when I say you need to have about 4 or 5 bullet points under each heading, and you should be okay.
And then just to add on to that, What's important is the statement says state 5 aspects. So even though you may know 6 or 7 or 8, only state 5, don't state more than that. You're going to be wasting your time by doing that. Only follow the instructions and state the 5 facts.
Okay. The next one refers to the advice. Now, once again, advice is a verb that has 2 ticks at the end. What we are looking for as markers here is we are looking for the essence of your statement. We are not looking for something that you make a statement and a qualifier. We are just looking for the essence. And it says there, Overberg traders should outline specific responsibilities, expectations of Sean's new position. You don't need to have that sentence in complete order just like that. You would say, Overberg traders should explain specific responsibilities and explanations. That's the essence, and therefore you will get your 2 marks. Determine the employee's strengths, weaknesses, skills, or interests in psychometric tests. If you said that you can do psychometric tests, that should be okay for 2 marks. Overberg traders should determine the relationship with the expectations of the positions and the competencies of Sean. Now, this is enough marks for you to get you to 32 if you have only that under those bullet points. As I say, there are many more. If you go and check on the old exam papers, there are many more options, but these ones should be enough. Right. Discuss the implications of the Skills Development Act on the HR function. I just want to show you guys in your booklet that you have received, it says there are positive and a negative impact. Now, unfortunately, this is not really what the question asked. You get a question that says discuss the impact, and when you get discuss the impact, evaluate the impact, that means you need to respond either positively or negatively or both. But the question did not ask for the impact. It says discuss the implications of the Skills Development Act. The SDA is the abbreviation for the Skills Development Act on the HR function. Now, we need to be very particular when we read questions, because that on the HR function means it's not the general impact of the Skills Development Act. It is specifically those things pertaining to the HR function. So let's go through them quickly. The human resources function should interpret the aim and requirements of the Skills Development Act, which we of course have done in legislation, and adapt the workplace skills training program accordingly so that we can comply with the law. Identify the training needs of the employees and provide them with training opportunities so that they will perform their tasks efficiently. In terms of the National Qualifications Framework, to assess what skill levels your employees have. Okay, interpret the aims, requirements of the framework to the National Skills Development Strategy, assist managers in identifying skills training needs. Now, boys and girls, you will find that there are, again, many more options to that answer. But when you study, there's just too much content to go through. What you never need to learn more than 5 bullet points of any concept that we are dealing here with. Never more than 5, because you are going to burn yourself out long before you've started studying. So I would like you to concentrate on the 5 that makes the most sense to you. It may not be the ones that you've just seen on your screen. It could be other ones that make sense to you, but rather stick to the ones that make sense to you.
Okay, Dion, there's been a request just to go back to the introduction slides. Unfortunately, we can't go back. At the end, I'll show you the e-portal where this presentation will be uploaded, and all the information, and I'm assuming it's probably the information with those action verbs, all this information that is in the slideshow will be available on the e-portal, and I'll show you the link to that at the end of the broadcast. Okay, we are now getting to the end of this essay question, and it says, the last one, recommend 4 aspects that must be included in the employment contract. Okay, now once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is
just a statement. You don't need to explain anything. Recommend means it's a short little statement. The essence has to be there. It's just a statement. And once it goes there, like things with this, you can figure out yourself. Personal details of the employee, details of the business employer, the name and address, a clear job title or description, clear job description, well refined. Ladies and gentlemen, these are things that you will always find in any employment contract. And if you have seen one before, that actually goes without saying. And you can expect to get this question in one of your question papers, whether it be at school or at the end of the year, because they like asking that question. It comes around quite often, and that's the easiest marks that you can get. Right, and now we get to a possible conclusion to your essay. Now, once again, the word essay has to be there. There may be no repetition from either the body or from the leading statement or your case study that you started off with. Now, this is just a suggestion that came from the old question paper, so those are the ones that were accepted, but normally they are not very strict when it comes to conclusions. If the conclusion makes sense and it's not repeated, you normally get your 2 marks. Okay, employees are one of the most important resources in businesses, therefore their success should be guaranteed. Effective placement and procedure will ensure that skilled, competent employees are retained. It is important that the employer and employees sign the employment contract. Okay, and that would be your essay. Now I want to get to the technical marking aspects of an essay. Now, one of those FLASO ones, and I will explain it to you later in a bit detail, is to get to originality marks. Now, that is very contentious because originality marks are looking for recent information that you can use in order to illustrate a point or enhance a statement that you've made, but the emphasis is on recency. But I will explain that to you later. We have included 2 ones here that you can use should you get an essay just like this one, that you can use to get your originality marks. And I'm going to read it for you. It says there, Jacques Nienaber was recently appointed as the head coach of the South African rugby team, the Springboks. The position of the head coach is an example of a job title that will appear in the employment contract. So where can you use this? You can use this in that section where it says state the things that are necessary in an employment contract, in that section of the work. You can put it in there, and that should be enhancing what you are trying to say, and that will give you an originality mark. The second one is the Career Times of the Cape Times, Monday, the 10th of February 2019, published in an advertisement for vacancy as senior accountants. The advertisements mentioned the successful candidate will be responsible for completing cash journals and ledgers. This is an example of a job description that will appear in the employment contract. Once again, in that last section of work where it says advise or recommend 4 aspects that must be included in the employment contract. And if you put it in there, you will find that, that you will get your 2 originality marks.
Hey, Dion, I just think it's important to spend a bit of time on this originality because it's quite a difficult mark to get now. So, although it's been separated in this workbook, I think it's important to remember that it needs to be in the applicable place within your essay.
That is
so,
correct.
Going back to that first example, you said, or in your first example, it said that the position of head coach is an example of a job title that will appear in the employment contract. So then it would be appropriate to put this example in the section where we had to indicate what items need to be part of the employment contract.
That is correct. Because it's not something that you write at the end. It is something that you include in the body next to the place that you want to illustrate. Remember why we use examples. We use examples to illustrate or illuminate a specific point that we have made to make the reader understand a bit better. It's no use putting it at the end because I'm not illustrating any point. I want to illustrate a point within the body.
Okay, then you also mentioned this FLASO. And if I can get a shot from the top. I've written letters FLASO down. Can we quickly just explain to learners what this FLASO means?
I can. The F in FLASO is the amount of marks that you get for facts. Okay, normally there's about 44 facts available, but we only need to get 32. We mark to a maximum of 32 facts because the rest is a technical mark that will get you to 40. Okay, so that is the mark that you get for the amount of facts that you got right. The next one is L, and that stands for layout. Now, if the word introduction was actually there and the word conclusion was there and there was something written underneath, it could have been wrong that what you wrote underneath. It could have been a wrong fact, but there's something written underneath introduction and something written underneath conclusion. You will get those two L marks. If you only have a layout for introduction but no conclusion, then you will get one L mark. The next one is analysis. That's what the A stand for. Now, you could remember in the beginning I told you you need to attempt the entire question. Even if you wrote only the headings down, I have attempted the entire question. Now, what that means is I can get my analysis marks. Analysis means if I've attempted every bullet point that the question has asked you for, you will get 1A. If I have then scored more than 16 marks out of the 32, if I've scored 16 or more marks for facts, then I will automatically get the other A as well. Okay, to get back to the FLASO there, the S stands for structure and synthesis. But these days, we assume that you are going to start off with both S marks. So it's given to you automatically unless you do something like the following. I haven't answered or I haven't attempted to answer more than 50% of the paper. So in this case, there were 5 bullet points. I've only attempted 2 of those bullet points. That means I've attempted less than 50% of the paper or of the question, and therefore 1 S mark will be deducted. The other S mark will be deducted if you wrote something completely irrelevant. Irrelevant doesn't mean that you are wrong, so you can test the boundaries in terms of what you want to write in there. But as long as it is relevant. Irrelevant would be something like this is about the human resource function and you are speaking about management and leadership. It is irrelevant to the question and therefore you will get a -S mark deducted. But that is very rare these days for us to deduct -S marks. It would be better, you can almost guarantee that you will get both your A marks or S marks. The next one is, of course, O for originality. Now, originality in this case refers to recent examples. Now, they say, how recent is recent? Anything within your matric year. So it would be to your advantage to look at the newspapers and things that you can take into the exam room with prior knowledge, and you can use those examples to illustrate the point. But it must be recent. It cannot be something that happened in 1980 and that is old news and everybody knows. That is not original. It doesn't illustrate the point anymore and it's almost irrelevant. So then you cannot get your O mark. So what we need is 2 of those examples somewhere in the body to illustrate a point, and that will give you your 2 O marks. Now, if we add everything up, 32 marks for your essay, for your facts, and 2 marks for a layout, 2 marks for analysis, 2 marks for structure, and 2 marks for your O's, then, of course, it adds up to 40 marks. And that is how a question or an essay question is formulated.
Okay, Dion, we got a question from Martin Lacker from Tarkastad in the Eastern Cape. He says they were taught to answer essays in full paragraphs and not in bullet point form. Will he be penalized? So, would you like to address Martin?
I can address Martin. Martin, as I said earlier to you, this is not an English essay, nor is it a history essay. If you were taught that, that is not wrong. You will not get penalized if you are writing anything in paragraph form. But I know marking at the end of the year, there are 23,000 scripts that needs to be marked by 250 or so markers. So you can imagine that at the end of that time, you are quite tired. So the reason why I say write in bullet point form is it makes it easier for the marker to spot where your answers are, where the marks lie. If everything is in one bullet point, then you can imagine if a marker marks quickly, they can miss any important points, and that paper doesn't necessarily get moderated. It goes through the system, and you might miss out on important marks. So I would say writing in bullet point form does two things for you. It makes it easier for the marker to find the mark and to allocate the marks accordingly. And secondly, it helps you to structure your answer in such a way that you know when you've written enough or too little. As I said, in an essay form, we want about 8 marks per subtopic unless stated otherwise. But if we can get 8 marks per bullet, then it will bring you to your 32. So if you can write, let's say I get 5 bullet points to throw caution, then you know that each one of those headings are at least worth 10 marks each, and that will give you enough marks for your 32 to get to your maximum points. So no, to answer your question, you will not get penalized for it, but it's better to write in bullet point form.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And I think it's important to understand that when you are preparing to answer your essay questions and answer any question, think of the person that is going to be marking your script and try to make it as easy for them as possible. Especially when your teachers are marking lots of scripts, they get tired, and when the format is a little bit unclear or not easy to see what you're trying to say, you might lose marks which you actually should have got. So try and stick to the bullet point format just for your structure. You can even use tables, especially when you're trying to compare information or indicating the impact of positive and negatives. You can even use tables in your essay. It's not, as Mr. Van Zyl said, it's not an English or a history essay where we're sticking to the formal essay structure.
Mr. de Klerk, maybe I can just interject. There is one. When I say we write in bullet point form, I've seen with my learners, some of them take it as a license to write staccato sentences. Remember, I cannot give you 2 marks or credit you with 2 marks if it is not in a full sentence structure. The sentence must be in full, but if you write in bullet points, it structures your answer just a lot better, and you know how much you've written, and that will make it easier to calculate if you've written enough.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, grade 12s, in your core notes and in the resource pack that your teachers have received, there are also these word searches, and it can be used as part of your preparation as well. So if you have a look at this word search over here, perhaps your teachers could use it as a game in the class, where the teacher could divide the class into a number of smaller groups, and then your first task as a group is to find the word, and the second task is to then be able to explain the word, where you get 1 mark for 1 point for finding the word and a second point for explaining the word correctly. So it might be useful as an activity in the classroom where we can just divide all the work up and we can share our knowledge with each other in the classroom. So it might be a fun game for you to try in the classroom, but it will be effective learning as well. Okay, then we get to some section B type questions. And when answering section B type questions, it's important to familiarize yourself with the action verbs that we spoke about. So when you look at the question, read all the information, read the statement full, or read the full statement, and then look at each question individually and see what is required of you. So at this part of the broadcast, I would like to ask the learners to have a look at this question, and I want to see if you can send in some of the answers for us. So I don't want to give you the answers. I want to see if you are able to give me the answers, and then we can check if you are correct. So looking at this first question, it says, read the scenario below and answer the question that follows. So Gauteng clothing manufacturers, and the abbreviation is GCM. And you'll see whenever there's an abbreviation, the they will not write out the full business's name in the question. They will use those letters GCM. So when you see those abbreviations, it's just the name of the business. So Thabo, an employee of Gauteng clothing manufacturers, is not performing his duties effectively after being trained on several occasions. GCM has decided to terminate his contract. I'll just read that quickly again. Thabo, an employee of Gauteng clothing manufacturers, is not performing his duties effectively after being trained on several occasions. GCM has decided to terminate his contract. And question 2.1.1 says, identify the reason for terminating Thabo's contract in the scenario above.
Mr. de Klerk, I just want to answer. There was a question that came up that I'm thinking that we might run out of time, but I just want to answer this question. That is from Kukamba Sabua, and she said they were educated that in an introduction we should take the first 2 bullet points questions, and yet you haven't mentioned such a thing. Now, I'm not quite sure what you mean by the 2 bullet points. If you're referring to the 2 bullet points that is in the question itself, then that would be regarded as a repeat, and you will only get the maximum of 2 marks for your introduction, and you will not get awarded those marks later on in the body. And I'm not sure if I understood your question correctly. I hope that is what you asked. I'm not sure what you meant with the 2 bullet points first. If that was the 2 bullet points that is either in the statement that was given, or the case study or scenario, or the first 2 bullet points from the actual question, both of those will cost you a lot of marks.
Okay, thank you. So coming back to the question on this consolidation activity, identify the reason for terminating Thabo's contract in the above scenario. But what we need to just take note of is that in the statement, we need to make sure that we understand that Thabo was dismissed for not performing his duties effectively even after being trained on several occasions. Okay, so the business has tried to assist Thabo in being able to perform his tasks accurately, and he has not been able to perform that. So that would actually form part of a fair dismissal because the business is following the correct procedures in this dismissal process. However, that's not the question that was asked. The question was, identify the reason for terminating Thabo's contract in the scenario above. Do we have anybody that has answered this question?
I've got Zweli Mtembu from Blouberg Rand High School. That is 2.1.1, and he says not performing duties effectively.
And there we have the answer on your screen. Thabo was dismissed for not performing his duties effectively. And that is a type of question where the answer is somewhere in the statement or the scenario that was given to you. So it should be a mark that you are looking to achieve. Okay, the second question was, explain 3 other reasons for terminating an employment contract. So let's see if we can get a few students to send in 3 other types of 3 other reasons as to why the business would terminate employees' contracts. Okay. Have we got any responses?
I haven't got any responses yet, Mr. de Klerk.
Okay, so this is a slightly trickier answer. But what's important here is the question and the mark allocation. So if you look at the question, it says, explain 3 other reasons for terminating an employment contract. So what you need to understand is you need to mention 3 things or 3 other reasons for terminating the employment contract, which means that the 9 marks that is allocated for this question, if you divide that by 3 items that you have to identify, it means that 3 marks are allocated per item that you are going to mention. Okay, so you would normally get 2 marks for the reason for terminating the contract, and then 1 mark for explaining that reason or explaining what the reason is. I'll repeat that again. You'll get 3 marks for explaining, 3 marks for identifying 2 marks for identifying the reason for terminating the contract, and an additional mark for explaining that reason. So 3 marks per item. I see somebody is typing.
I am see there's typing, and I've got one there. I'm not sure. This is not an answer, and I cannot now see.
Okay, let's have a look at some of the answers. Oh, here we go. We got a couple of answers coming through now.
From Sinutando from Matthew Goniwe School at Craddock. He said dismissal or retrenchment. Remember, the question said explain 3 other reasons. So, with other words, giving the 3 other reasons will only account for 2 marks each. It is almost the same as a name and explain. The moment that you see explain 3 and there's a specific number attached to that, and you can see that the mark allocation is 9, then you know immediately there's going to be 2 marks for the naming and 1 mark for an explanation. So although he said in this particular one, he gave me 2 reasons, dismissal and retrenchment, we now need the explanation of what those ones were, and that will give him 6 marks, although those 2 things are correct. Dismissal, remember, dismissal is what I do when a person is not doing his work properly, so we cannot say that will be accepted because that is one that is already in the case study. We are looking for any other reason than dismissal.
Okay, so having a look at the answers, and thank you for that correct answer for retrenchment. So you'll see on the slide, retrenchment is where people are retrenched because the business could be struggling financially and may not be able to afford the staff that they currently have. Then there's also voluntary resignation, where people choose to leave the business, and this could be for various reasons. It could be because they are finding employment somewhere else. It could be because they're not satisfied where they're working, but it is their choice for leaving the company. And the last one is retirement, where the person has reached a predetermined age, and once they reach that age, they have to retire from that position, and then they will start going on or earning a pension after that. Okay, we need to quickly move to essay number 2. Unfortunately, we won't have time to cover everything in this essay, but as I mentioned before, this presentation will be on the e-portal, where you will be able to find the answers. But what I'm going to do quickly is I'm going to go to each of these bullet points. So looking at the bullet points on the slide, these are all the bullet points you have to address in the body of your essay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you on which page of the core notes you are able to find this information. So I'm going to quickly go to each of these bullet points. We've already spoken about the technicalities of the introduction. The first point 2.2, tabulate the difference between job description and job specification. You can use a table, as I mentioned before, and this information will be found on page number 51 in your core notes. So make a note for yourself that the difference between job description and job specification will be found on page 51 in your core notes. Then, where you are required to explain the meaning of recruitment, this will be found on page 50 in your core notes. Okay, so explaining the meaning of recruitment, it's found on page 50 in the core notes, and this is a description, or it's a definition that you will be required to explain. So you're not going to spend a lot of time writing a lot of information about recruitment. You are simply asked to explain the concept. So it's going to be between 2 or 4 marks that you will be earning for this particular part of the essay. So don't write a lot of information about recruitment. Just explain the concept of recruitment. Then, when you are asked to explain the impact of external recruitment on the business, this information will be found on page 52 in your core notes. And remember, when the word impact is used, you are required to then explain either positive impacts or negative impacts, or a combination of the both. So when they specify, or when they only say analyze the impact of external recruitment, then you can decide, are you going to write about the positive impact, or are you only going to write about the negative impact, or are you going to give a combination of both? What you must just be careful for is that when they say analyze the positive impact, then you can only write about the positive impact that that particular aspect has on the business. Or when they ask you about the negative impact, then you can only speak about the negatives or the disadvantages of that particular aspect. So make sure you're reading the statement accurately so that you can determine whether you are only going to mention positives or only mention negatives, or if you can write a combination of both. But the impact of external recruitment is found on page 52 in your core notes. There we have the positives as well as the negatives found on page 52 in your core notes. Then 2.5, where you have to discuss the role of the interviewer and the interviewee. It's important to remember, or important to identify the difference between interviewer and interviewee. Okay? Because you will either be talking about the interviewer or you'll be talking about the interviewee. And the second part that's important is the during the interview part. So in this statement, they say discuss the role of the interviewer and the interviewee during the interview. Now remember, learners, there is a process for interviewees and interviewers before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview. And make sure you identify which aspect you need to speak about. If you are speaking about during the interview, or if they're asking you to speak about during the interview, you can't mention items that need to be done before the interview or after the interview. So make sure that you read that statement carefully so that you don't lose unnecessary marks. Okay? But the role of the interviewer and interviewee is on page 54 in your core notes. Okay, so there we have the role of interviewer and interviewee. Then suggest the ways that the human resource function can comply with the Employment Equity Act. This information will be found on page 59 in your core notes. Okay, so on page 59, I think page 60, you have all the different ways that all the different labor laws affect the human resource function. Okay, and then we have our conclusion as well, and again our two relevant examples. So for this particular essay, these two relevant examples, just remember that they need to be inserted into the body of your essay somewhere, and they need to be relevant to what you are speaking about. So for example, the first fact that you speak of, the career times of Cape Town, the Career Times of the Cape Times on Monday, 10th of February, published an advertisement for the vacancy as a junior accountant. The advertisement mentioned that the candidate must have a relevant BCom degree as well as a minimum of 3 years work experience. This is an example of job specification. So a good place to have this original fact would be when you are discussing the difference between job description and job specification. And then this will be a good place for you to insert this example. And the second example, where Tsunami Consulting posted an advertisement for the vacant position of Quality Assurance Manager on the Careers 24 website on Monday, the 10th of February 2019. This is an example of an external recruitment used by Tsunami Consulting. So again, put this essay where you are speaking about perhaps the different types, or put this fact where you're speaking about the different types of recruitment that the business might have. I just want to remind you of the details of Mr. Momberg that you could contact. So here we go, contact details. This slide is very important, so take a minute and familiarize yourself with these contact details. For this presentation, as I said, will be on the e-portal, and that link is at the bottom, the third point over there, wcdportal.co.za. Once this presentation is uploaded, you will have access to it there. And then, or you could email Mr. Lester Momberg at lester.momberg@westerncapegovernment.za, westerncape.gov.za. So lester.momberg@westerncape.gov.za, and he could possibly email this presentation to you as well. Grade 12s, that brings us to the end of our broadcast, and I would like to say thank you for tuning in, and I hope that we were able to impart some valuable knowledge. Thank you to Mr. Dion van Sail. If you have one last word for the learners.
Learners, yes. Business studies, unfortunately, has no cut corners, recipes. It is a hard study subject, so just stick with it. Make sure that you have your core content notes with you, study from those. If you can put your hands on old question papers, that is the best way to learn. Get a study buddy maybe, and mark each other's work. Don't mark your own stuff, mark up someone else's work. That is the way to grapple with information, and that is how it's going to stick. Mr. de Klerk, thank you very much. And I hope they have a lovely afternoon.
Have a wonderful afternoon, grade 12s, and we'll see you next time.